Hello everyone, welcome to English 9 covered by Miss Tao in the Super Memory for Schools program. Today we continue learning Unit 9, Natural Disasters. Lesson 3, Write and Language Focus. Let's take an overall look at today's new words and grammar. For vocabulary, we only have 2 words. They are to destroy and homeless. About grammar, we will continue learning about relative clause. We will especially learn about non-defining relative clause. Next, we will differentiate between defining and non-defining relative clause. Let's discover today's new words. Natural disasters can destroy houses. To destroy and make people homeless. Homeless. Today's new words include only 2 very simple words. They are to destroy and homeless. To help you remember new words more easily, I will give you an example. Natural disasters can destroy houses and make people homeless. Natural disasters can destroy houses and make people homeless. To destroy, homeless. Next, let's come to the grammar. Today, we will continue learning about relative clause. In the previous lesson, you have learned about defining relative clause. Today, we will learn about non-defining relative clause. And next, we will compare the differences between defining and non-defining relative clause. Let's start with grammar. Look at the picture. This is the book.
Giấy mèn phiêu lưu ký.
The book,
Giấy mèn phiêu lưu ký.
which you lent me yesterday, is very interesting. In my example, which you lent me yesterday, as we have learned, is a relative clause. However, let's see if I can omit this clause or not. When I have omitted it, I have the book
Giấy mèn phiêu lưu ký.
is very interesting. So when we have omitted it, the sentence still has enough meaning, right? Which book is interesting? It is the book.
Giấy mèn phiêu lưu ký.
So the clause which you lent me yesterday is a subordination supporting the noun in front of it. However, in this case, the clause is not necessary. We can still omit it. So we call which you lent me yesterday a non-defining relative clause. Today, we will learn about non-defining relative clause. Back to my example, which you lent me yesterday is a non-defining relative clause. So what is non-defining relative clause? First, it is the clause that gives more information. Second, the clause is not necessary to have. If it's not used, the sentence will still have enough meaning. And third, the clause is separated from the main clause with 1 or 2 commas. In my example, which you lent me yesterday, is separated from the main clause with 2 commas because it is in the middle of the sentence. However, in some cases, if the relative clause is at the end of the sentence, you only need a comma, because the other punctuation is a period. Let's continue with non-defining relative clause. Back to my example, the book,
Giấy mèn phiêu lưu ký.
which you lent me yesterday, is very interesting. I use the relative pronoun which. Please notice that the relative pronouns who, whom, which cannot be omitted. Besides, I have taught you that we can use that instead of who, whom, which. However, in non-defining relative clause, we cannot use that. Please notice 2 things. First, in non-defining relative clause, you cannot omit who, whom, which, and you cannot use that. Next, so how can you know if a sentence uses non-defining relative clause? Very simple. You will look at the noun in front of the clause. If it has a proper nouns like
Giấy mèn phiêu lưu ký.
Tom, the Grand Hotel, Vietnam, America, or in front of it, the noun or noun phrase contains my, your, his, her, possessive adjectives or possessive cases. Or if in front of the clause, the noun phrase contains this, that, these, those, the clause behind it will absolutely be a non-defining relative clause. Let's summarize the knowledge about non-defining relative clause. First, non-defining relative clause can be omitted. Second, there are commas to separate it. Third, you cannot omit pronouns, who, whom, which. Fourth, you cannot use that, and especially in front of the non-defining relative clause, there are proper nouns or noun phrases containing my, your, his, or her, or this, that, these, those. Next, we will differentiate between defining relative clause and non-defining relative clause. To the right, I have defining. To the left, I have non-defining. Remember the following words: can, cannot, cannot. For the defining side, can, cannot means you can omit pronouns like who, whom, which. You can use that, but you cannot omit the whole clause and cannot use commas. In contrast, on the non-defining side, we have cannot, can, cannot omit who, whom, which, cannot use that, can omit the whole relative clause, and finally, can contain commas. Let's revise today's lesson. About new words, we have to destroy and homeless. About grammar, we have learned about non-defining relative clause. Besides, we can also differentiate between defining and non-defining relative clause. Remember that on the defining side, can, cannot, and in contrast, on the non-defining side, cannot, can. Can and cannot do what? Let's revise it. On the defining side, we can omit who, whom, which, can use that, cannot omit the whole relative clause, cannot use commas. And in contrast, on the non-defining side, we cannot omit who, whom, which, cannot use that, can omit the whole relative clause, and can use commas. Our lesson ends here. I hope you will study well. See you in the next English lesson of Miss Tao in the Super Memory for Schools program. Goodbye and see you later.